This is day 1 of creating 3 quick and easy meals from the food prep that we did together in my last video. Let's see how close we can get to eating the daily dozen as we make use of the time-saving hacks, pre-cooked and ready to grab and go ingredients in the fridge. This video will be a 4-part mini-series, and once it's complete, you'll find the links to the other episodes in the description box below. Let's get into it. Breakfast started by ticking off my first whole grain of the day with 1 cup of the pre-cooked millet. I added half a cup of frozen blueberries, and nuts for the day was a portion of walnuts. I added a tablespoon of ground flax seeds, and Dr. Greger considers these so important that they're in a daily dozen category all of their own. I used a cup of almond milk and simmered this for 3 to 5 minutes on medium heat. This was more than enough to heat through the millet and plump up those juicy blueberries. I was surprised how quickly the millet reheated and how nicely it kept its texture. If someone else had served this to me, I wouldn't have known that the millet had been pre-cooked, as it absorbed the milk and took on both the colour and the flavour of those blueberries. This is my first time using millet, and I'll definitely be batch cooking it again in the future as part of a food prep session. I was so impressed with how well it's stored in the fridge and how quickly it can be incorporated into a meal. Try to avoid overcooking it initially so that it still retains its fluffy bite when you reheat. After breakfast, I had a few spare minutes to make the cheesy beanie sauce to go with tea. This will make at least 3 portions, so I used the full tin of cannellini beans that we rinsed and drained yesterday. To the beans, I added 3 tablespoons of nutritional yeast for that cheesy umami flavour, a generous pinch of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of ground white pepper, and 3/4 cup of unsweetened vegan yoghurt. My preference is to use soy yoghurt, but coconut yoghurt would keep this low FODMAP. I think everything can be improved with a hit of citrus, so I squeezed in the juice of half a lemon, catching the pips in my hand to avoid them slipping into the blender. This can get a bit sticky, but if like me you've ever accidentally eaten a lemon pip, then you'll know that the messy hands are worth the trade-off. I whizzed it up until everything was smooth and popped it in a glass jar in the fridge. This is a great make-ahead recipe. It lasts at least 3 days in the fridge and it thickens slightly as it sits. On to mid-morning snack time and my first ever attempt at oil-free popcorn. I was pretty sceptical about how well this would work and more than a little concerned about the bag bursting into flames. But for research's sake, I decided to try the paper bag method of popping corn in the microwave. And just to prove I'm not making this up, you can see that 3 cups of popcorn equals 1 daily dozen serving of whole grains. Yup, I was surprised too. I used a 1/4 cup of kernels in a simple brown paper lunch bag. It's important to fold the top over tightly, but to also leave ample space in the bag for the corn to expand. I folded mine twice, but then twisted the corners really tightly to secure the bag. My microwave is 800 watts and the kernels only needed 90 seconds on full power before the bag was fully expanded and the popping noise had slowed down to a few pops per second. I was impressed with how quick and easy this method is and the minimal cleanup required compared to my usual stovetop method. However, without butter or oil, the dried flavourings didn't stick to the popcorn, which made it a little bland for my taste. I'm sure there's a better way to do this to maximise flavour, but for now I'll stick to my buttery goodness method. Sorry, Doc. On to my speedy stir-fry lunch, and I threw together a simple dressing made with 1 tablespoon of soy sauce, 1 tablespoon of peanut butter, 1 teaspoon of maple syrup, 1½ teaspoons of tomato puree, 1/8 teaspoon of 5 spice, and 1/8 teaspoon of cracked black pepper. These were just some of the spices I used today, and a 1/4 teaspoon of any spice you like counts as your daily portion. There's plenty to choose from, so this is 1 box on your checklist that there's no excuse for not getting ticked off every day. I loosened up the dressing with 2 tablespoons of warm water to get it to a smooth, runny consistency. I finally sliced the leek greens that I'd thoroughly washed during my prep session and managed to tick off both my other vegetables and cruciferous portions for the day with this base of green beans, leek and broccoli. The cruciferous veggies can sometimes cause a bit of confusion, so here are the suggestions. Think veggies that are sulphurous and pungent. The other veg includes everything not included in the cruciferous and green categories and is mainly non-leafy. I use carrot and courgette. Speaking of greens, I used kale for my first of the day, and this section includes dark leafy greens that are typically bitter tasting. And there is some crossover, particularly between the greens and cruciferous categories, with things such as kale, rocket and collards, so these could be counted towards either or both categories, depending on how well your daily dozen attempt is going. Then I make a little room in the pan for my pre-baked tofu. I'm pleased to see that tofu and tempeh can be included towards the bean category. These both have generous low FODMAP serving sizes, and I doubt that I'd make the beans quota without them. I drizzled over the peanut sauce and rinsed the jar with a little hot water to get the most out of it. After turning off the heat, I stirred through some homemade sauerkraut, and this could have counted towards my cruciferous tally for the day in place of the kale. As I typically exceed the daily minimum amounts of vegetables, I usually have the option of what to count towards each category. I often add up multiple smaller portions of different veg and greens to equal the full daily dozen recommended portion sizes, which is an easy hack for also keeping things low FODMAP. This stir fry cooked in less than 10 minutes and made one huge daily dozen portion or 2 low FODMAP portions. Now onto my final meal of the day, which includes a fresh and fruity salsa. Here I'm hoping to squeeze in all 3 of my fruit portions for the day, which is not ideal from a low FODMAP perspective, but sometimes needs must. I'm typically not a big fruit eater, so I try to include what I call savoury fruits in this category, things such as avocado, tomato, jackfruit and banana blossom that I can eat as part of a main meal rather than a standalone piece of fruit. And you'll see here that Dr. Greger doesn't actually count tomatoes in the fruit category, but as someone taking FODMAPs into consideration as I aim for the daily dozen, me and the good doctor will just have to agree to disagree on that one. And if you've not yet heard the news, the low FODMAP serving of avocado doubled recently from 30 to 60 grams when it was retested by Monash. Yay! Unfortunately, the low FODMAP serving of red bell pepper still sucks, but when eaten raw and chopped finely like this, it's more than enough to give me the sweet, peppery taste of it throughout the salsa. As mentioned before, I'm taking a liberty by using these cherry tomatoes as my second fruit of the day. If you're sticking to low FODMAP serving sizes, then this portion wouldn't be enough to count as a full daily dozen fruit portion. I added a tiny amount of red chilli, minus the seeds, for a mild spicy kick that's unlikely to trigger my IBS. And then my final fruit of the day comes in the form of pineapple that works perfectly in this salsa. And here I begin to regret my life choices and accept the fact that I woefully underestimate the size of the bowl required. So I swapped it out so I can give it all a good stir. A small handful of fresh basil finishes this off beautifully. Some fresh mint would also be really good here. A dash of salt and pepper to taste and my salsa is done. The canned green lentils that we prepped make my second bean portion of the day. I add a splash of water to prevent them sticking and zhuzh them up with 1/4 teaspoon each of smoked paprika, ground cumin and the low FODMAPper's secret weapon, asafoetida. Finishing off with a tablespoon of tomato puree and adding a splash of water here and there to reduce down the puree and prevent the spices from burning. Next I'm adding that pre-baked sweet potato just to heat it up and take on some flavour. Again, this could have been counted towards my veg tally if I'd been a bit light on the veggies earlier in the day. My final grain for the day gets ticked off with this wholemeal tortilla wrap, and I was just as surprised as you that these are on the checklist. And my final bean of the day sneaks under the radar with a generous dollop of the cheesy bean sauce that I made earlier. Finally, it's time to assemble, and after smoothing on a layer of sauce, I added the fresh and fruity pineapple salsa. Let's top that with the spiced lentil and sweet potato mix to add some bulk and bite. My final green for the day is this flourish of rocket. And full disclosure, without following the checklist in the Daily Dozen app, there's no way I would have thought to add this, and I'd have been really annoyed with myself for missing out on that extra tick. Then we fold our little burrito blanket, and I am completely white girl in this, so leave your mockery and rolling tips in the description box below. As this is a main meal, one wrap is just not going to cut it for me, so I add the rest of the ingredients to the plate as a side salad, but this could also make 2 wraps if you prefer. Then to finish off the day and get that all-important gold star, I added my drinks and aerobic exercise that you'll thank me for keeping off camera. Here's a quick peek at the drinks that count towards your tally. Thankfully it's not only water, although the hot chocolate was a surprise. And day 1 of my 3-day food prep series is complete. I hope you found something helpful here today that you can use in your own journey towards the Daily Dozen. I'll leave links to the rest of the episodes as they're released in the description box below. And if you like this video, please let YouTube know by clicking the thumbs up. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!